So in all the hype surrounding Apple Vision Pro, we've actually had quite a few changes to the Mac lineup, which I haven't really talked much about. We've had new Macs and new price cuts across the board, so I figured now would be the perfect time to do an updated Mac buyer's guide, Tailosive Tech approved, and yes, that means a lot of certified refurbished. Let's begin. So there's a crap ton of laptops to talk about, so I thought we should start with the desktops because I think that's where a lot of the more recent changes have been. Starting with something that felt like it took forever to actually come out, the Apple Silicon Mac Pro. Boy, what a lot of hype for basically nothing. They really tried to be as lazy as they could with this one because they essentially just slapped an M2 Ultra on the inside. Still 5nm, nope, there's no upgradable RAM, no upgradable GPU, no Apple Afterburner cards, and yeah, it's technically faster than before, but no more terabytes of RAM per se. Unified memory is supposed to be good enough for Apple. At least it does by default ship with a terabyte now. That's kind of refreshing. Currently, actually, the only Mac in the entire lineup to have 1 terabyte by default. But essentially, I feel like none of you should buy this, and I do mean you specifically. Yes, there are people out there that need custom video and networking cards or custom audio cards, but those kinds of people are working with very specialized custom equipment, typically not people just working from home, they're working with companies. I honestly think they should rebrand it to Mac Enterprise, as this is meant for, hardcore industry like business use. It's not really something for individuals to buy, which in my opinion is why it's weird that Apple is selling it. Typically, Apple likes to sell more general hardware for consumers and professionals, but typically not something that is this specialized. So if you're the type of person to click on a YouTube video from a weird, obscure YouTuber saying, here's my Mac buyer's guide, you don't need the Mac Pro, okay? It doesn't even have an SD card slot, unlike its younger, way cooler, way cheaper brother, the Mac Studio. So this just got refreshed as well, and it's incredible. The M2 Max has performance that is close to on par with the M1 Ultra, which is by no means a slow processor, and if for some reason the M1 Ultra isn't good enough for you, the M2 Ultra's performance is close to that of like doubling up on the M1 Ultra, which is going to be great, I think, for the vast majority of YouTubers that have more money than time and just need something to export everything incredibly quickly. Can't fuss around with any slower CPU out there. You just need the best of the best of the best. Every second counts, and if you just want the best overall Mac and you don't have time to fuss around with networking cards and all that stuff, M2 Ultra Mac Studio starts at $4,000. And yeah, in terms of personal computing, if you're doing audio engineering or video editing, there's really just nothing that can beat it for the money. And honestly, other computers out there that are more expensive are probably not going to beat out the M2 Ultra. But if you don't just need every last second of your export to be as fast as possible, I honestly think what should still be heavily considered before you go out and buying the base model Mac Studio with the M2 Max is the fact that because there's new M2 Mac Studios, now you can buy a certified refurbished M1 Max Mac Studio that's like $1,500, and the M1 Max is still the computer I'm using to edit this video on right now, and the Mac Studio has tons of ports and I/O to choose from. It's a great form factor. It can fit on your desk instead of on your floor. Ships with 0.5 terabyte of storage and 32 gigs of RAM by default. This is just an incredible deal for $1,500 if you're the type of person that gets all their work done on a desktop, not a laptop. And when you're buying certified refurbished from Apple, it's basically brand new. Plus, this is a tower. There's no display on it, so you don't need to be worried about scratches or dings or that kind of thing because it's just a box that you're going to plug cables into. And if you're buying it from Apple, it comes with a full 1-year warranty. So honestly, in terms of the desktop space, this is an incredibly difficult deal to beat. Probably the only thing that kind of comes close to it would be the M2 Pro Mac Mini, which Apple introduced not too long ago. Starts at $1,300 and is a pretty decent deal. It's a pro level chip and you're getting the M2 form factor, so a little bit better CPU performance than likely what you would get with the M1 Max, but they're really on par with each other. You don't get as many ports and you don't get the SD card slot, but as far as the base model goes, I think the M2 Pro Mac Mini is not bad. But once you start speccing it up, like if you want it to have more storage or more non-binned cores, that's when I'm just going to say, okay, just go with a Mac Studio at that point because you're going to get better ports and probably a better chip overall. But it's easy to get caught up in all of this desktop class performance and all of these pro max level chips, because in reality, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. The regular M2 chip is still incredibly capable. You can edit 4K content, 8K video with ease on just the regular M2 chip, which you can find in the base model Mac Mini. Well under $1,000. It is just honestly very compact, can basically be hidden on your desk and still have an amazing amount of performance out of it. So if you're just on a budget and you want a decent desktop, M2 Mac Mini, really great value there. But again, please don't just start speccing up the base model Mac Mini into the thousands of dollars. That's when the Mac Studio, I think, is going to start to make a lot more sense for you. And yes, Apple still technically sells an iMac, and the only thing more dated than its chin and white bezels is the silicon on the inside, which is still rocking an M1 chip. Yeah, just don't buy this. I'm sorry. I know some of you think that you want an all-in-one family computer. You don't. You really don't. Trust me. Don't listen to that side of your brain. If you want a desktop, just get the Mac Mini. There are decent monitors out there that you can couple with this one. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't care about having that limited ports or having that limited of a computer setup, then you're probably not the kind of person that's going to care about having a 4.5K resolution. There are great 4K monitors that you can just pick up now for a couple $100. Couple that with the M2 Mac Mini, you'll save so much money and have more ports to choose from than the 24-inch iMac can offer. It's dated already, so even if you care about having an all-in-one iMac, that one is probably due for a refresh later this year. So yeah, no, just do not buy the 24-inch iMac. I'm sorry. Now moving into the very complex laptop space, let's start with the lower end and work our way up. So for some reason, after nearly 3 years, Apple is still selling the regular M1 MacBook Air 13-inch. It's a great MacBook, still very capable, still great performance, still just gets the job done for what a lot of people need, and decent battery life, and you shouldn't buy it. At least from Apple new, okay? Like, there's still a lot of people out there that just want a decent, reliable laptop. They don't care about notches or MagSafe or making sure they have the thinnest, lightest possible design. They just want a decent laptop that works, and you can find these through Apple Certified Refurbished for $850, or if you're willing to go eBay refurbished, which, yes, you can do. You're not going to get scammed just because it's not from Apple, but that's where you can find them for like low $700. And these days, now that the M2 MacBook Air has been discounted, you probably start to find some for under $700. Just as far as notebooks go, this is an incredible deal for a Mac or PC. M1 chip can still handle lots of 4K video editing, lots of audio engineering. It has decent microphones. My good friend Mike on the Tailosive Tech and EV podcasts, he's still rocking an M1 MacBook Air, which he got certified refurbished, and he's been happy with it. It's just an overall great machine. It runs perfectly silent because there's no fans. It's got 2 Thunderbolt ports. It's still got a headphone jack, and the display is decent. And honestly, in my experience, I thought the M1 MacBook Air had a better speaker system than the M2 MacBook Air. That's just one guy's opinion. But yeah, battery life on it is great. And it doesn't have the thinnest bezels in the world, but a lot of people are just on a budget and they just want a Mac that's reliable, consistent, and will last them a long time. Yes, the M1 MacBook Air is a great choice. Just please don't buy it new. Don't buy it for $1,000. You can find great deals on it on eBay or Amazon, and Apple is still selling them certified refurbished too, in which case they're an amazing deal. Of course, some people are disappointed with the more dated wedge design, and they want the notch with thinner bezels on their M2 MacBook Airs and that thinner chassis design, and they want MagSafe back plus a 1080p webcam, in which case the M2 MacBook Air may have a lot of what you're looking for, but once again, even with the $100 price cut Apple just applied to it, I'm gonna have to say don't buy it new. Simply because I have recently found out through Apple Certified Refurbished, they are now selling M2 MacBook Airs for $930. So if you don't want to go through eBay or Amazon for whatever reason and you have to buy through Apple, this is only $80 more than the M1 MacBook Air. Originally, when the M2 MacBook Air launched, there was a $200 price gap between the M1 Air and the M2 Air. And I was like, for $200, they're not really that different. The M2 chip is not substantially faster than the M1. They're both on the 5nm architecture. So the main thing I like about the M2 Air is just a lot of MacBook Pro features that they brought to it, like the updated design language, the 1080p webcam, and the notch. But it's still a 60Hz LCD panel, which is fine. So I had a harder time justifying a $200 upcharge, but all of the benefits of the M2 Air for just an extra $80, $930 for an M2 MacBook Air. That's honestly a really good deal, even as someone who's not a particularly huge fan of the M2 Air. I think when you start getting above the $1,200, $1,300 price category, that's when you should just commit to buying a certified refurbished 14-inch MacBook Pro, because that's going to have the mini LED, that's going to have ProMotion, it's going to have 3 USB-C ports and an SD card slot and an HDMI port. Yes, even with the existence of the M2 Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pros, I still think, yeah, they're not that much faster. You'd probably just be fine with an M1 Pro or M1 Max MacBook. Yes, I'm biased because that's still what I'm using, but after almost 2 years of ownership, it is not slowing down. The battery life is still great on my MacBook Pro. I love it. It exports things quickly. I've been using it a ton for both getting work done on this trip as well as media consumption. The speakers are so much better on the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro. Just an incredible sound system on that laptop compared to what the M2 Air is offering. But I haven't seen 14-inch MacBook Pros on the refurbished side of things get much below $1,500 to $1,400. So now that there's M2 MacBook Airs that they're selling for $930, yeah, that's like a $400 price gap now. So I can't really say, just go for the Pro. That's a huge price increase. That's almost a 50% higher price than what you can get now for the M2 Air. So while I haven't recommended it new, I do think, yeah, okay, if you care about the better webcam and the updated design language, that's a pretty fantastic deal. And a similar story comes to my perspective on the 15-inch MacBook Air, the new kid on the block that just entered the picture. It's actually way more affordable than I was expecting, and while it's not really a product I think I need to buy and review for you guys because it's pretty simple, picture the M2 MacBook Air, but it's just a couple inches bigger. Yeah, it's decent for the money. You know, it's pretty thin, it's pretty lightweight, and for $1,300, it's hard to argue with. The only situation in which I'm going to stop recommending the 15-inch MacBook Air is if you start speccing it up, okay? For some people, 256 gigs is fine. You know, they just wanted a bigger laptop. They didn't need all the pro-level hardware. They just wanted the big screen. And usually those people that don't care about the pro-level hardware that want the big screen, it's because they're not doing as many pro workflows with their laptop, right? They're just watching media on it or browsing the web or writing text documents or doing, you know, keynote presentations. For those kinds of people, maybe 256 gigs of storage and 8 gigs of RAM is totally fine. But if you're like, well, I want 512 gigs of storage or I want 16 gigs of RAM, okay, well now you've already spec'd yourself into the MacBook Pro level of pricing, in which case those already come with half a terabyte of storage by default, and they come with 16 gigs of RAM by default. You don't need to spec those things up, and once you start speccing up a 15-inch MacBook Air, it quickly becomes $1,700 or $2,000 plus. And if you care about that storage and RAM, that's fine. It's just you can get a MacBook Pro for the same amount of money and sometimes even less with the same amount of storage and RAM and way better display, way better speakers, way better ports to choose from, and oftentimes better battery life too. And the only compromise is, okay, it's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit heavier, but frankly, I still think that the current day MacBook Pros are still somewhat light and thin. I've been traveling with my 16-inch MacBook Pro a lot over the past couple weeks, and I don't find it huge and heavy and cumbersome. And the 14-inch MacBook Pro is so close in size to the 15-inch MacBook Air, I don't think display-wise you're going to notice a huge difference. You're still going to be able to easily slide that into a bag because the footprint of it is smaller, and the thickness is just a couple millimeters. The 15-inch MacBook Air is like 0.2 pounds lighter than the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So like if your goal is portability, I really don't think it makes that big an impact. But if $1,300 is at the end of your budget and you're not interested in going up to $1,400 or $1,500, then yes, the base model 15-inch MacBook Air is an incredible value, and it's refreshing to see Apple actually make a larger size option for those who don't need the pro level specs. Because truthfully, as much as I brag about the MacBook Pro, M2 chip is still really, really fast, and it runs great in a fanless architecture. I think the M2 chip is a little bit more prone to thermal throttling than the M1, but if you're not a pro, you're probably not going to run into those limitations anyway. But keep in mind, the main reason I'm telling you to consider the 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pros once you start speccing it up is not because I think you're going to appreciate the M1 Pro chip or the M1 Max chip performance. It's more so the ports, which you will notice or appreciate when you're traveling, like being able to charge the MacBook from either side, or plug in an extra cable to charge your phone, or having an HDMI port to plug into TVs and monitors when you're traveling or trying to showcase a video or something to do a presentation at work or at school. Those ports and those speakers and that display, that's what you'll notice and appreciate, not so much the silicon. At the end of the day, if you're just an average consumer, you don't need the pro level chip. M2 Pro, it's all fast. It'll all work great. And all these laptops have great battery life, by the way. And then that leaves us with the weird kid in the lineup. Yes, Apple is still selling the 13-inch MacBook Pro, in which case I would say the only reason you should buy that MacBook is literally just the touch bar. If you love the touch bar, Apple still has an option for you, I guess. They probably have a bunch of touch bars in stock and they're trying to sell out of them and they just haven't yet. But don't buy the 13-inch MacBook Pro for the performance because the M2 chip really doesn't perform all that different in that MacBook compared to a MacBook Air, which you can get an M2 MacBook Air for way cheaper. And if you're a diehard touch bar fan, you can find M1 MacBook Pros with the touch bar for way cheaper than $1,300. So the M2 MacBook Pro, pretty much in my head, absolutely no reason to buy that. Just buy the M1 MacBook Pro if you're a diehard touch bar fan. And if you're not a touch bar fan, get an Air or get a 14-inch or 16-inch Pro. The 13-inch Pro, in my head, shouldn't exist. And based on John Turnus's answer to John Gruber's question, when he was asked, so John, why do you guys still have the 13-inch MacBook Pro in the lineup? He basically just immediately looks at Greg Jaws, Apple's head of marketing, like, so, you want to take that one, Greg? And everyone essentially laughed at it. So my guess is John really doesn't want the 13-inch MacBook Pro in the lineup. It's just, it sells too well and marketing is happy with the sales of it. So they're not going to get rid of it until people stop buying it. So if you want that gone from the lineup so it will look cleaner and please the ghost of Steve Jobs, then please stop buying the 13-inch MacBook Pro. It's so old, it's so dated, and it's just not worth it, to be honest. And if you're not happy with the performance you're getting out of any of these MacBooks I just talked about, then yeah, it's kind of a boring answer, but the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros with the M2 Pro and M2 Max chip, yeah, they're the fastest MacBooks ever made. If you just need every last ounce of performance out of your machine and you need it to be a laptop, then yeah, okay, they're expensive, and yes, I would encourage you to go certified refurbished with an M1 Pro or M1 Max if you can, but if those chips are still too slow for you, then the M2 Pro and M2 Max is probably still going to be too slow for you because you're never going to be satisfied, but at least they're the fastest you can get today. Yes, I approve them for that specific use case where you need every last second off of your export time, but yeah, that kind of summarizes where I stand on the entire Mac lineup. What do you guys recommend and not recommend? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Sleep here, and I will see you all in the next one.